It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to your source for fantasy hockey news and degenerate gambling breakdowns. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host for an extra spicy episode. We're going to talk about our competitive listener league, wins, losses in the draft, and where we think we're headed, all on today's episode. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am joined, as always, by my distinguished co-host, Mr. Steele Rodin. And on this side of the microphone, it's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Steele, today is one of those episodes that you and I are going for a little look under the hood to see exactly what we've been doing for our teams. We've been putting our money where our mouths are and showing the listeners, telling the listeners as well, what we've been doing with our squads. And now this is one of those spots where I think headed into the season, where there are still some drafts to be done, some of our listeners and watchers out there can really benefit to see from what we've been doing. I know you were really happy with your draft. I am a little bit uncertain about my team. We'll run through our favorite picks. We'll run through our teams. And we'll also run through, you've already pulled off a nice trade. I've already had to hit the waiver wire. These are some of the scenarios that I know a lot of people out there are already having to go through. So hopefully on today's episode, we can help take you through what will take you over the top at the end of the year. And Steele, honestly, before we get into it, I am so ready for the puck to drop. I sound like a broken record, but for real, I'm seeing the line rushes. I'm seeing all of these preseason prognostications. I am ready for hockey action, baby. And I seriously cannot wait for that puck to drop.
Only 5 days away from the start of the NHL season, October 10th, a Tuesday. And I believe there's 3 games that night. I'm going to be flipping back from all 3 games. Because you're right. Puck NHL is right around the corner, and we couldn't be more excited. We're going to dive into our draft results from the competitive league in the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Listener League.
Yes.
We're going to do the casual one for Friday's episode. We also have one more mock draft to do just the day before the NHL season kicks off, but we got a ton more of content to get to. We're super excited about it, but today is a self-reflection time. We're going through the draft results, we're going through our teams, and we're going to see what went wrong, what went right, and what sort of things we're looking towards for this upcoming season. So I guess I'll start us off with my entire team right now. I had the first overall pick, just to give everyone a little bit of a background about the format of the league as well. 2 centermen, 2 left winger, 2 right wingers, 5 defensemen, 2 goalies, and 3 bench spots. There's also 2 IR spots on the board as well. But that's the format for the league. 12 category league. Not going to get into the categories. It's all the basics: hits, penalty minutes, goals, assists, power play points, all the basics that you could imagine. But for the draft results, I had the number 1 overall pick. So of course I take Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
I had to wait a while to get to my second round pick. But it was fine. So start off with Connor McDavid first overall, Alexander Barkov 32nd, Miro Heiskanen 33rd. I needed a defenseman in the top 3 rounds, and Miro Heiskanen was right there sitting for me. So I went after him. Paired Connor McDavid up with my boy Zach Hyman in the 4th round. Then Dylan Larkin. Actually, I've been receiving a ton of trades for Dylan Larkin, and this is a player that I've kind of been keeping under the radar for myself. I think he's going to have a monster year. He's gained 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. He looks big out there. He's dominating. You get Alex DeBrincat. Lucas Raymond could have a pretty decent season. Moritz Seider is going to have a decent season. So I like the looks of Dylan Larkin in this Detroit team. After in the 6th round, Johnny Gaudreau, Tyler Toffoli in the 7th, Devin Levi in the 8th, Nazem Kadri in the 9th, Jake Sanderson in the 10th, Neil Pionk in the 11th, Jake DeBrusk in the 12th, Noah Hannafin in the 13th, Anders Lee in the 14th, Hampus Lindholm in the 15th, Oliver Bjorkstrand in the 16th, my boy Jake Wallman in the 17th, and John Gibson in the 18th. And, I want to talk about some of what I believe are my mistakes, as well as some of, the good things I did in this draft. Number one, first mistake I made in this entire draft is I heavily favored forwards. It just happened to go that way. When the draft was happening, I was trying to go after goalies. I was trying to go after defensemen. The one I wanted got taken right before me. It happened. So that plan went a little bit out the window. I went heavy on the forward position and kind of fell behind in the goalie department. I drafted Devin Levi, a rookie for Buffalo Sabres, and then John Gibson with my last pick in the draft, who just you don't really know what's going to happen with Anaheim this year. They're going to give up a ton of goals. They got a bunch of young prospects and young players on their teams. So for me, I made the crucial mistake of not targeting a true number one goaltender, to start things off. But one of the good things I did, because I was so heavily favored with my forwards, I was able to facilitate a trade for Linus Ullmark. So I ended up trading Tyler Toffoli, who was my 7th round pick, for Linus Ullmark. So I now have Devin Levi and Linus Ullmark, which I'm happy with. And then two of the things that I really liked that, fell to me in these rounds was Jake DeBrusk at 192nd overall was an absolute steal. Absolute steal of the draft. And then Anders Lee at 224. I think those two players were not getting enough credit. I don't exactly know why they fell that far. But for me personally, to get Jake DeBrusk in the 12th and then Anders Lee in the 14th, I was extremely happy about. I'm very, very happy with how my team turned out to be. I love my first I love my first 10 draft picks, because even Jake Sanderson in the 10th round. But I couldn't be more ecstatic with how my team's shaping up right now, especially after that trade for Linus Ullmark.
I would say, Steele, your first 6 or 7 rounds are absolutely picture perfect looking at your roster right now. But if I were to have to poke holes in you, I like that you already addressed it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the moves that we've made coming up at the end of the show. I want to talk to Steele about this trade. I want to talk to you about, I've also made 3 waiver wire moves to try and address some of what I thought were deficiencies in my squad. I will say this, though. We are buying into Devin Levi big time. Yeah. We're expecting a regression from Linus Ullmark. But we know that the Buffalo Sabres might take a lot of pucks on net trying to still find themselves. So if I were you, the only spot I'd really be concerned about, and I think you've already tried to address it, so you know what I'm talking about, is the goaltending area. Yeah. But where you have gone right is probably the most solid and balanced forward group in this league at first glance. So kudos to you. And I'm with you on that. I'm with you on all of these takes. And I think the one that I agree with you the most on is Dylan Larkin. And what I'm really going to like to see from the captain of this Red Wings squad that is now so balanced out. He doesn't have to necessarily be that guy every night. Now they are a really gritty, balanced forward unit. Now I think you will see him benefit from that. Let's head over to old Big Flip squad, because things went off the rails for me early, Steele. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, you and I talked about having a plan and sticking to it. I'm texting you before the draft. You're going, Flip, where are you drafting? I was 8th overall. You know I really hate that spot. That's a tough one with 14 GMs did we have in this league, Steele?
Yes, 14.
8th is a really tough spot, and I'm not just saying it because I was in it.
We had 16, including you and I.
Thank you. 16. 8th, smack dab in the middle, is arguably the worst spot, one of the worst, in my opinion anyway. But I think I did an okay job considering that all of my planned players, Steele, over the first 2 or 3 rounds got snatched right under me. So, first round, and you're just going to know that it's round 1 through 18, so I don't need to read those off. Round 1, Mikko Rantanen. Then I went right off the rails, Steele, because all of my players were taken. And I went to Jake Ottinger, something that I didn't want to do so early. I really did want to employ the strategy of the guys on Apples and Ginos. You know, Blake Creamer's our boy. Michael Amato. We've learned that this strategy can work, waiting for your goalies. And then look at what I go ahead and do is I take Jake Ottinger in the second round. Am I happy that I took a number 1 goaltender and I had him? Yes, but one of my immediate missteps was that I think I took a goalie too early. Of course, I got one of the best ones out there. But anyway, take Jake Ottinger in the second round. Then I go Sebastian Aho. This is where I really think I start to pick up some steam here, Steele. Sebastian Aho at 40th overall, I think, is a really good pick. Then I got Jacob Trouba, Vincent Trocheck, Jacob Chychrun, Stuart Skinner at 104th overall in the 7th round, I think is a great goaltender pickup, but that's really where I wanted to be taking both of my goaltenders, and I had to pull the panic button early, but I'm okay with it. Morgan Rielly, Tyler Bertuzzi, Adam Larson, Lawson Krause, Seth Jarvis, Colton Parayko, Philip Deneau, Chandler Stevenson, Connor Clifton, Yanni Gourde, and Alex Killorn. My last 3 choices, though, by the way, just because I did hit a power outage, were auto drafts. So that's why I went immediate to the waiver wire to try and shuffle some things around. But immediately, Steele, looking at my team, I think I'm going to be okay in some of those banger league categories. Where I'm worried about is my lack of offensive firepower. I think I might struggle big time in the goal scoring category. I know I have Rantanen. I know I have Aho. But after that, I'm going to have to get pretty creative with guys that are going to be producing at an offensively elite level. And that's just me being straight up honest. When I look at the guys on your forward unit, I got the Lawson Krauses of the world. Sure, I got the Tyler Bertuzzis who, they can bring some offensive value. But if they're not playing healthy and they're not getting 10 hits a night, I'm going to be in trouble for matching up those offensive categories. And I think that's where my biggest weakness is, because on my blue line, Steele, I've been actually doing a pretty good job, I think, about addressing my blue line over our mock drafts and our drafts. I'm really loving Trouba, Chychrun, Rielly, Adam Larson, and Colton Parayko with Connor Clifton as my backup D. I really do like my blue line core, but I think I'm going to struggle offensively.
I really like your blue line as well. Sorry about that. I think my Wi-Fi went out there for a little bit. That's of a second. I might have been frozen. But I caught the end of that. But looking at your team, I completely understand the last 3 picks were auto drafted. So I'm not even going to talk about that. I was going to say something, but it was auto drafted. So that's not up to you if the power goes out. I loved your defenseman, though. I know you really like Adam Larson. He brings the hits. He brings the blocks. He brings actually a little bit of offensive ability to his game as well. You get Jacob Trouba, who's an absolute beast. If he can get a little bit of some offensive production going as well, he could be a stud. Jacob Chychrun, another stud. Morgan Rielly, another stud. And then Colton Parayko to fill out some of those other peripherals as well. I agree with you. I was going to, you already mentioned it as well. The plan sort of went off the rails a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Picking Jake Ottinger in the 2nd round. I was going to bring that up, but sometimes it happens. You got an absolute stud regardless of what round you picked him in. And look what happened to me. I waited, and those goalies were all taken by pretty much the 7th round. So, it's
a fine line.
Exactly when you got Stuart Skinner. So I was even I was targeting Stuart Skinner in that 7th round. He got taken, and it kind of screwed me up for the rest. So I went after some forwards and defensemen as well. We are going to continue talking about these draft results, the trades, the waiver wire pickups, and the wrongs and rights that Flip and I both made. But we got some sponsors to talk about.
Yes, we do. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Steele and I are in on those Thursday same-game parlays. We're loving Sunday fun days on the NFL, and NHL is back, baby, so you got to be tapped into FanDuel. The app is super easy to use with a wide range of betting options in the NFL world, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and a lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season in style. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast to draw your attention to the taste that's going down in the bread aisle. All thanks to Dave's Killer Bread, bread amplified. Anyone can bake bread, few can rock it, and Dave's Killer Bread is the champion of killer taste, killer texture, and is for those who want to rise above the boring. Organic and healthy doesn't have to mean boring when it's made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients, packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. 21 whole grains and seeds bread has a subtle sweetness and a seed-coated crust, while Good Seed products are the boldest and sweetest of all. Dave's Killer Bread was built on the belief that second chances can change lives, because after spending 15 years in prison, not only did the guy with the guitar you see on every loaf turn his own life around, he's helping others to do the same. By hiring the best people for the job, regardless of their background, he's ensuring your mornings no longer taste like cardboard, your taste buds don't have to feel sedated, and your sandwiches can become superstars. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your favorite grocery store.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen. The NHL season starts next week, and Locked On has put together the ultimate season preview for the Eastern and Western Conferences. You can find the episode available now on Locked On NHL or on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I, Monday through Friday. Hit that subscribe, hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate all that love and support you show us every single day. And continuing on the topic of these draft results, on the trades and the waiver wire pickups, we're going to continue with your team, Flip, and then we'll get back to mine in a little bit. So I want to go to the waiver wire pickups. Like you said, you auto-drafted the last 3 players, which were Connor Clifton, Yanni Gordon, Alex Killorn. You mentioned this to me the other day. Alex Killorn is now injured. He will be out for a pretty decent amount of time to start the year. 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, so he's going to miss the first month and a half of the NHL season. Again, that's just the minimum. So who were some of the players that you picked up off the waiver wire and that you're very excited about?
Yeah, so Connor Clifton was actually a guy that I've had my eye on a little bit. He was actually, I think, in my key when the power went out. So I think he was my first quote-unquote auto draft, but he is playing on the top pairing with Rasmus Dahlin right now in Buffalo. So the fact that he is going to be the sandpaper side, even though Rasmus Dahlin racked up PIMs and hits last year, he's going to be that anchor for Rasmus Dahlin to be able to do his offensive thing. So I'm loving getting a piece of that top pairing in Buffalo, number 1. So I kept Connor Clifton in terms of the guys that I did swap out. But what I'm looking forward to here, Steele, is I had to get a little bit more balanced. So I do like Yanni Gourde. I really do. And I like him in banger leagues a lot, but I wanted to spread out my forward depth. So I go to a guy in Riley Smith, a player that you and I are, I've talked about. He can be very streaky. He doesn't exactly bring a ton of peripherals, but what he does bring is dual position eligibility. And right now, while Gensel still recovers, and we know he's going to be back sooner than later, we also know Brian Rust had his struggles last year. And I think what the important thing about Riley Smith is he can slot in anywhere. Yeah. So in the meantime, while Gensel's back, he can go up there on the left side and play with Crosby and Rust. If Rust doesn't perform, he can take that spot on the right side and play with Sid and Gensel. Or I'm fine if he's playing on Gino's wing. Either way, I want a little piece of that offense. So I went after Riley Smith, Steele, instead of a guy in Yanni Gourde, who, given what I just said about all my peripherals in terms of PIMs and hits, and I think I got my sandpaper down with the likes of Lawson Krause, Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Deneau, and other guys, and Adam Larson, who really fill out those categories. I wanted a little bit of offense, so I went after Riley Smith. That was the first one. I don't know what you think about that.
You know how I feel about Riley Smith. You know exactly how I feel.
Let's move on then.
So I like this player a lot, and we talked about him along the sides with Rickard Rakell as well, and what this Pittsburgh offense can do. Obviously for the first week without Jake Gensel, and then what to expect when Jacob comes back. I like all of your waiver wire picks. Like you said, you auto draft. Even Alex Killorn, there was a little bit of upside to what he's going to bring to Anaheim, but now that he's injured for the next month and a half, you got to go straight to the waiver wire to fill that position. Is Alex Killorn is he on your IR, or did you drop him fully?
So I just straight up dropped him, Steele, and I could have taken that route. But here's my other prediction. There are going to be a number of enticing waiver wires after the first week. So as much as I could have stashed him, and maybe that was a bit of a quick, hasty move, I also took a quick look around the NHL in terms of, in our league especially, and this is a competitive 16-team league, there is not a lot of anything in terms of backup goaltenders. And instead of leaving myself high and dry, I wanted to get a little bit of insurance there. And that's just my strategy because I've been burned so many times. There's nothing worse, Steele, honestly, than looking at this head-to-head category league and not even hitting the minimum for your goaltender for the week, having your stats counted. So I went with a bit of an insurance blanket. And is Sam Montembeault on a good team? No, he's not. But he is going to get the run out as the number 1 in Montreal, at least until Caden Primo is ready to go. And I really do think that Sam Montembeault, in a pinch, can be a great fill-in goaltender. So I dropped Alex Killorn, and I picked up Sam Montembeault. That was my second waiver wire move.
And I think that's something we're going to have to implement for next year. It didn't even click into my head about how many GMs that we have and what the problem's going to be with goaltenders. Is we actually have this rule in my year-to-year league, only 2 goalies maximum drafted. Right when you draft your first 2 goalies, that section gets locked off and you can't even look at goaltenders anymore. Because, again, it is what it is now, and I'm not even mad. I like my team a lot. But there's a few teams and a few GMs out here who have 3 or 4 goaltenders on their roster right now.
Right.
And it makes it very scarce for goalies on the waiver wire, because like you said, there are not a lot of goaltenders out there. So we're gonna have to implement that for next year, where there's only 2 goalies maximum. And again, you don't have to draft John Gibson or Jonas Johansson. Well, I guess you could draft Jonas Johansson because he seems to be like that number 1 guy right now for Tampa. Who knows? But yeah, it's a very scarce position for goalies right now. If there's no limit and you've got 16 GMs in the league, we're going to talk about this on tomorrow's episode for the casual league. Yes. I haven't yet to do any waiver wire pickups in the competitive league, but on the casual league, I've made 1 waiver wire pickup. I'm super excited about it. Okay. It's a player I've talked about for a while now. We're going to get to that on Friday's episode. We're going to continue talking about trades and the draft results after this break, but this episode is also brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all on Indeed. Find top talent fast with the Indeed suite and powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Something I personally love about Indeed is, again, that instant match. It makes it super easy to connect with the employers as well. Indeed does the hard work for you. Sponsor a job and boom, instant match shows you candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description immediately after you post. With Instant Match, you can start hiring fast. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a business owner, listen up. Your company could be mentioned right here. With the NHL season right around the corner, Locked On has a special locals-only NHL kickoff package. 2 local businesses, yes, only 2 local businesses can sponsor this podcast for the upcoming NHL season. Find out how you can get this exclusive sponsorship and hear your business on this podcast. Text the word advertising to 33777. or visit lockedonpodcast.com/advertising and let us know who you are. Our team will assist you to achieve advertising success with Locked On. Once again, text the word advertising to 33777 or visit lockedonpodcast.com/advertising. We look forward to hearing from you.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit that subscribe, hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us every single day. And Flip, if you don't mind, we'll head back over to my team right now and talk about that for a little bit. Just a little bit of a side note. If you're looking to, bolster up your offensive group, I've got a ton of forwards available right now, and I wouldn't mind picking up another defenseman. I could use some help. I could use some help on the blue line.
Let's talk.
We'll talk off the podcast.
Also, before we head to yours, Steele, by the way, that was a very tantalizing tease. And I will say this, I made some moves in our listener casual league as well that I want to talk about tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that. I really like the tease. So I just wanted to tease a little bit more. And just to leave my last, end point here on my Sam Montembeault take. The Montreal Canadiens had a high scoring point getter last year of Nick Suzuki at 66 points. 65, 66. It's right in there. I was looking at it this morning when I was reading up on the show. So that's number one. We know how bad that team was in front of them. And I believe they set the record for most man games lost in terms of injuries last year. They were a shattered unit in front of Sam Montembeault. Sam Montembeault was still able to put up a 16, 19, and 3 record steal with a .901 save percentage. That tells me you're going to want to be keeping your eye on this goaltender. Do you need to be as bold as me as dropping a piece in Killorn to pick him up? Maybe not. But if you're needing a little bit of goaltending insurance and Sam Montembeault is out there, on any other team, in my opinion, he's a legit number one goaltender. Yeah. And I think you should really have him on your watch list as one of those players that you immediately go to add. I know the Montreal Canadiens are going to be bad, but this kid is a good goaltender with number one goaltender capabilities. He's just on a really bad team. Anyway, over to your team.
Look, we know that the stats don't show what this kid is capable of. Again, a poor team in front of him. But when you visually watch him play, you see the effort, you see the skill. It just,
he's a gamer.
Again, the stats just aren't panning out the way that a lot of us would hope to be. But he is going to be that number one goaltender because I don't believe it should be Jake Allen at this point. He just looks like he's completely out of his element right now.
They want it to be Primo, which makes me nervous. But anyway, that's not happening yet.
But to continue actually on top of that, waiver wire pickups, like I said, I facilitated that trade. I traded Tyler Toffoli for Linus Allmark. I ended up dropping John Gibson and picking up Tyler Seguin. So that just adds another boost of those forward categories for shots, goals, assists, power play points. Hopefully he can continue doing some nice things in Dallas. But I want to mention this to you because I got traded by one of our favorites here on the podcast, someone who was in our podcast listener league last year, and that is Brock. Leon's Fire Pandas sent me a trade a couple days ago. I don't think I actually mentioned this to you. Thought I'd bring it up on for today's podcast.
Thank you.
He wants to trade me two of my favorite fantasy players, Jack Eichel and Claude Giroux, for Zach Hyman and Dylan Larkin. So this was one of the trades that I've been proposed multiple times for Dylan Larkin. He's not the only one. I've had a few people reach out to try to trade for Dylan Larkin. At first glance, I was like, oh, I love Jack Eichel. I love Claude Giroux in the fantasy league. Both of those guys are studs. But after, maybe 5 minutes of thinking about it, I was like, what am I even thinking about? This is Zach Hyman and Dylan Larkin I'm talking about. Zach Hyman playing with the best player in the world. He puts up a ton of shots, ton of power play points, hits and blocks. And same goes for Dylan Larkin. 32 goals, 47 assists, over 240 shots. He brings the hits. He brings the blocks a little bit. So I couldn't pull the trigger on it. It's not that I didn't like it. It's not that it wasn't close to fair. I just think my two players, Zach Hyman and Dylan Larkin, are more valuable.
Yeah, I think so, Steele. This is also one of those things, and this is my main when you're discussing this with me. We are serious about fantasy hockey. And I think you and I mentioned this a little bit on our top 5 ways to dominate your draft episode a couple of days ago. By the way, check that bad boy out. It's fire. Make sure you tune in, subscribe to the channel, 5-star review, the whole lot. Is we want to make sure our team is the best it can be, right? Obviously. But maybe over meddling too early and kind of going, oh, did what I draft wasn't right? Sometimes it can go your way, but I think also we have the tendency to really overanalyze. And I think what you're doing here is sticking with your gut, sticking to your guns, and going with who you liked in your draft. And I think aside from what's on paper and that making sense with the players you're describing, especially Larkin, we already got into that one. Is don't really push it to rush the gun. Yeah, the waiver wire is your friend, of course. But in these competitive leagues, especially, Steele, when you have more money, time, and research usually invested, don't just go and bail on the players that you have really sunk your teeth into. I would actually, really be wary of doing that too early. So I love how you're employing this strategy. And sorry, it was Hyman and Larkin, right?
Yeah, it was Hyman and Larkin, and I would be receiving Claude Giroux and Jack Eichel.
That is someone, in my opinion, also, Steele, that is listening to this pod very closely. Smart idea. And playing on your heartstrings about Jack Eichel. Because you have been very high on that player as well. And I think that's what I'm sniffing out in this situation because
I was sniffing that out too.
Yeah, the balance of what's here on paper, that is a one-sided trade offer for the most part. Is it horrible? Absolutely not. Is it one of those ones we're going to roast people on Twitter for this year? Or X? Or we're calling it X now. I'm seeing all over ESPN and First.
I'm calling it Twitter. It's still Twitter to me.
Thank goodness. So we're making a pod decision. It's Twitter.
Yes.
Perfect. Anyway, we're going to be roasting some of you guys on Twitter this year, so make sure you're coming correct with these trade offers. I don't think it was, heinous. I think it was very fair, but I like that you have gone this route. And I had a few trade offers come my way, Steele, and I actually declined them. I'm trying to bring up one of them, but also shout out to someone who just sent me this message in our league, and I'm trying to figure out what GM it is. All it says is T. Big Flip. 3 moves early with a cap at 75. Bad draft? ? I'm curious. I had a plan to draft a goalie in the 3rd round. Defense after. Failed big time, but just going with how the draft went. Hopefully it works out for us grabbing goalies early. I just had to read that out because I thought it was hilarious. Last year I took Sorokin in the 2nd round, and I got roasted for it. This year, I didn't really take as much heat for taking Jake Ottinger in the 2nd round. I just really hope, Steele, that Jake Ottinger continues to be the absolute stud he has been. And not to get off topic, because I will get back to what you were just saying about Larkin and Hyman. I want you to finish up your point on that. I just really love already how much interaction, how much support, how much interest we are already seeing in both of these leagues. Straight up kudos to all of our listeners out there for all their interest, and also our bad for the lack of consistency on episodes this week. That was mostly me. Big boy was in the old emerge with a blown up eyelid. Things are getting a little hectic around here, Steele. Thanks for holding me down, but just shouts out to all the listeners. We will be here Monday through Friday all season long.
Those imaginary bees got you in your dream, didn't they?
Steal something. I think it was too much crying from the Toronto Blue Jays. Maybe it was that.
It was probably that. And yeah, that was a little bit unfortunate. You can't even predict that. That is just completely out of the blue what happened. I don't want to talk about it. I wish everyone could see the picture Flip sent me the other day of him in the emerge. That was too funny. But to go back to roasting on Twitter, I've already done that a few times in my year-to-year league. I've gotten some heinous trades, some absolute brutal trades. But that's what happens. So if you're going to be a part of the Locked On Listener League, you got to be ready for some of those tweets out there targeting you. Also, the group chats on the Yahoo Fantasy Leagues are just popping right now. We're having a good time so far. It's going to be a great season. We are going to continue. We're going to get to the casual league on tomorrow's episode. We've got one more mock draft before the start of the season. That will be on Monday's episode. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find our episodes. And thank you guys so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
If you're a business owner, listen up. Your company could be mentioned right here. With the NHL season right around the corner, Locked On has a special locals-only NHL kickoff package. 2 local businesses, yes, only 2 local businesses can sponsor this podcast for the upcoming NHL season. Find out how you can get this exclusive sponsorship and hear your business on this podcast. Text the word advertising to 33777. or visit lockedonpodcast.com/advertising and let us know who you are. Our team will assist you to achieve advertising success with Locked On. Once again, text the word advertising to 33777 or visit lockedonpodcast.com/advertising. We look forward to hearing from you. Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.